And this one looks like a really solid area control game where you're going to be using cards in order to take control over different regions out on the board. Thematically, this is taking place during the Crusades, and you're going to have different Muslim or Christian factions that players are going to be playing as. And each player is going to have their own player board, which is going to outline 3 different building types. And you're going to be using this to keep track of your different building tokens and how much you've upgraded each type. Players will also get a player shield that they'll be able to use to hide all the different resources and tokens. And in this game, all the players' player boards are exactly the same. There's no asymmetry there, but instead the amount of tokens that you get to start with and your location out on the board will be variable depending on who you're playing as. So that is where the asymmetry is going to be coming into play. But the game plays over 2 phases, which each can last anywhere from 6 to 8 rounds, depending on a card draw, because you are going to have a randomized deck that's going to be determining the number of rounds for each phase. Players are going to be drafting cards at the start of the game until they have 4 cards to choose from, and there are a bunch of different cards offered in this game, and they can be used in a whole variety of different ways. But anytime that you use one of these cards from this moment forward, you're just going to be drawing another card from the deck. Each round you're going to be playing your cards into these different action locations in order to gain the benefit of that card and then also gain access to that specific action. Like I said, these cards have a whole bunch of different uses to them, and you might notice that they have different resources on the top of the card and different resources on the bottom, and those come into play depending on whether you decide to play your card to one of the top actions or one of the bottom actions. The resources that are shown there represent the resources that you're either going to have to pay or gain, depending on which action location you use with that card. What's cool about this is that it's the action space that determines whether you're gaining or losing resources, but then it's the card that determines which type of resources and how many that you're going to be gaining or losing. Not only that, but these cards will also overlap with any cards that were previously played at that location, and you're going to be combining the resources between the cards together. If the icon on the card also matches your faction, then you're also going to be able to gain access to the special ability of that card. And there are a bunch of different actions that you can perform. There's the income action that's going to gain you an amount of income depending on what buildings you have out on the board. Or you can also discard a card in order to gain a certain amount of resources. And there's also an action that allows you to place one of your influence tokens out on the city side of one of the location boards. And the way that this works is that anytime that you put a token out on the city side, it's going to be pushing any other tokens in its way further to the left, potentially knocking them off the board. This, of course, means that you want to be further to the right of the influence board, which is going to help you stay on there just a little bit easier. And you can pay additional gold in order to do that. The right side of the board is where players are going to be placing their support tokens, and there is an action to do that, but to be able to do this, you do also need to have influence in that region. And this becomes useful during a battle, which is another action, and whenever you do that, you're going to be declaring where and who you are attacking, and then you'll be able to ask for any allies that are there to support you, but your opponent is able to do the same. And then each player can also pay additional gold in order to take units from adjacent regions and pull them into that region. And then the attacker and defender will both be simultaneously revealing one of their cards, resolving its effect, and then adding any additional tokens and rolling dice based on any support that they have at that region. The side with the most strength at the end of a battle wins the battle, and that's going to be gaining the winner and their allies additional victory points. Another thing to note here is that players with support at a region can also use that support to attack the city, and they're going to be choosing a player to attack in the city section. And the way that this works is almost identical to the way that I just described, with the biggest difference being that players can't move additional units into that region. But there still are some other actions that players can perform outside of these battles, and the next one is the movement action, which allows you to pay in order to move any amount of units from one region to an adjacent region. And of course the build action, which will allow you to spend resources in order to build the different buildings out on the different areas on the board. And these can help you maintain influence in a region, they can earn you more income for an income action, or they can help you gain more units for combat. The game continues like this over the first phase until those 6 to 8 rounds are completed, and then you're going to be moving into a mid-game scoring, where players are going to be gaining points for the different locations that they were able to control at that point in the game. And then you're going to be adding a few new locations onto the board, and then moving into the second phase, which is going to be playing identical to the first, and then you're going to be doing an additional scoring at the end of the game. then the player with the most victory points at that time wins the game. And if you're interested to check this one out, I will have it linked down below.